go. Okay, welcome. I'm Ben Frank, and I am very excited to have a special guest on today's show. He is a professor and area head of sport management at the University of Delaware, author of 2 textbooks, including Sport Club Management. He's worked with or consulted for the U.S. Olympic Committee, U.S. Soccer, International Basketball, the Baltimore Ravens, the Orioles, and many more. The one and only Dr. Matthew Robinson. Matthew, thanks so much for being here.
Great. Thanks for having me, Ben, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. So I gave a little bit of an overview of some of your highlights, but for the viewers that don't and listeners that don't know you yet, why don't you give us a little more background just on who you are and what you do and how you got there?
Yeah, Ben. Again, my background really came out of the coaching area. I was a college soccer player and college coach, and while I was coaching, did my advanced degrees and a master's and earned a doctorate in sports administration, which is now more commonly called sport management. But really, over about the past 25 years, it's really been, along with being, in academia and working at a university, have been involved with, development of sport. And probably about 15 years ago, began doing international programs, working first for U.S. Department of State, but then also began partnering with the United States Olympic Committee and developed a program called the International Coaching Enrichment Certificate Program. And in the 12 years of the program, we've reached over about 350 coaches, over 100 countries in 25 different sports. And it's really about developing them as coaches, developing them as leaders so that they go back and can be impactful in their home countries. And within the United States, I've been very involved in the area of club leadership. I think it's really interesting how the United States has evolved, that we used to be very education-based sport, and you're seeing more and more of the relevance of the clubs. So really working with people that many of them are coaches that are now taking on managerial and budgetary responsibilities within an organization, really getting them to think about running their organizations as businesses and running them well. And in turn, then it makes a more positive experience for the participants in that organization. So it's been neat. You listed some of the organizations that I've had the great fortune of working with, either as a consultant or providing services for them. So United States Olympic Committee, USA Hockey, USA Basketball, US Lacrosse, US Field Hockey, USA Shooting. So a lot of organizations really, and yet them all recognizing that the clubs are really important in their developing their athlete pipeline and also developing their elite athletes as well as just people that were going to be involved with the sport. Yeah. So it's really been an interesting, 20-year ride, I guess you could say.
Awesome. And I'm really excited to have a chance that Bill ask you some specific questions about some of the club things like that. But before we get there, how is it also for young people looking at you and all the cool, you get to work with these professional teams and these different sports from around the world. What was it for you about sport, first of all, that got you into coaching? And then how did you take from, coaching into this transition where you are now?
Yeah, I think I was that classic kid that, I just loved sports. I played sports growing up. I had the chance to play soccer in college. And, I always thought like a coach, and even as a player, I was always looking at it from a coaching perspective. So I knew I wanted to get involved, with that. But I really think where things changed for me was, when I pursued my getting my terminal degree, it opened up a lot of opportunities for me to get into higher education. But then also, I think what's important in sport, is have this passion for it, but you have to look at it from a professional perspective. You have to have something that's of value to these organizations. And so I've always gone with the approach when I've worked with organizations, you listen first to what they need, and then you try to develop something that meets that need for them. So early on, I did a lot of market research, for example, and helping organizations understand their consumers, develop their marketing strategies, professional sports, college athletics, minor league sports. But then, like I said, I took this jump over onto the international side, which is great because it got me back into coaching, and I'm working with more of the sport itself. So I've really enjoyed that. But again, it's a value that I'd like to think the program we've done with the International Olympic Committee in partnering with partnership with the United States Olympic Committee has been impactful around the world and has really, impact sport in a number of countries. So I think it's the key is, number one, being passionate about what you want to do. And I think there's a lot of people passionate about sport, but then it's, okay, what can I do in sport? And trying to find that thing that there's a value. And, just knowing you, Ben, I think, what you've done with your club, I mean, I can tell you feel the passion when I'm in your presence, but also you have some marketable skills that have been amazing, for the benefit of that organization.
Thank you, and it's really interesting because so it sounds like a lot of us who now in sport as our career and our purpose and our passion for our life. Sounds like you were an athlete, of course. First, you probably had professional aspirations or whatever. Maybe as an athlete, played up to the college levels, and
Sure.
at some point you realize, okay, so I want to be involved in sport for the rest of my life because this is my passion. But you sound like you had to figure out, okay, how can I how can I be a professional for the rest of my life? And so
Yeah.
it's taking you down this kind of transition of, okay, coaching, but then even in coaching, you're like, well, how can I do something more, bigger, more impactful? Was that kind of your mindset at each step of the way?
I, it's kind of interesting with soccer that, my generation, there really wasn't a professional league to aspire towards.
Mm,
And
yeah.
really, you played soccer and, after college, it was, playing for club teams and things like that. And there wasn't, so again, my whole thing was I wanted to stay involved. So coaching was really the only option,
Mm,
which got me started in a very, young age. I was a college head coach, I think at
wow.
24 years old.
Wow.
And so I consider I'm very fortunate, on that side of things.
Yeah.
But, again, when you start talking about evolving through your career, I mean, I remember as coaching that as much as I enjoyed it, I remember a couple of times saying to myself, do I want to be doing this when I'm 40 or 50 years old?
Yeah.
And that's when I think I was doing my master's with an aspiration of being an athletic director at a smaller school. And then after my master's, it was, brought up to me about doing my terminal degree. And again, with the idea of being an athletic director.
Mm,
But while doing that, I really got exposed to the professor side and the academic side and research and getting involved in teaching. And so it was neat to be able to make a transition, but I still think a coach is a teacher. And I
mm,
think I just, went from a field to a classroom, and then I was staying involved and staying engaged in sport, which again was I'm passionate. And, the real ironic thing was 4 years ago, I'd started off my career to be an athletic director, and 4 years ago, I stepped in as interim athletic director at University of Delaware, and did it for about 6 months. So it was kind of neat that I checked that off the box.
yeah.
Only did it 6 months, but I could say I did it,
Yeah.
which was a really interesting experience. But it's still, at the end of the day, I really enjoy all the other stuff that I do. The
Yeah.
projects and being in the classroom with students at the university.
And how does being an athletic director differ from what you're doing now? Is it less opportunities to coach and teach and things like that, and more run the organization?
Oh yeah, I mean, Division One athletic director. It's. I was just amazed at the hours that were involved, the number of constituents that you were you were being accountable towards, or you need to be recognize their needs. There weren't enough hours in the day. I think college athletics is an interesting time in terms of revenues and
Mm-hmm.
what it costs to have a successful athletic program while trying to generate those revenues.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting experience. And at the heart, I mean, I think a lot of athletic directors today are coming from the business side or the legal side. And I came in, I think, somewhat old school, that I was a coach. And yes, I know those pieces. But at the end of the day, I still viewed I connected better with my coaches
Mm-hmm.
more than anybody. And it was about the coaches, it was about the athletes. But the reality was you have to generate revenue through fundraising, marketing, and so forth to pay for those programs.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, like, the Division One athletic director job is vastly different than a Division Three, athletic director's job. And again, I think the career path to that is different as well.
Yeah.
So
And what was it? What was it, and when was it that sparked your interest in expertise towards the youth sport club? Because you're coaching and then you're teaching at the university level, and then somehow I have your book here that we're going to recommend to anyone that's running a youth sport club, for sure. Sport Club Management. I've been reading that, and this, like, there's a lot of, put a lot of research, time, study, and you've also come to and spoken at a lot of different events with youth sport club leaders. I was at an event at the U.S. Olympic Committee, right,
yeah.
where people from different sports came over and heard you speak. What sparked that kind of deep interest in the youth sport club?
Well, it was interesting. When I got out of college coaching, a good friend of mine, Jeff Tipping, in the soccer world, had just taken over as director of education at the National Soccer Coaches Association of America, which is now United Soccer Coaches. And I had reached out to him to say, touch base. And he said, we have this request to start some educational programs for the people who run our youth clubs. That we have all kinds of coaching courses, but there's nothing there for, an executive director or even a volunteer president, of an organization. And he said, we're thinking about putting a weekend course together. And so I said, well, I know the management stuff and the sport management stuff I do. I said, I think that's an important component of it. So this was probably 2005,
Mm.
and literally met in Chicago. And I still joke about it. I wish I would have saved it, but it was literally the paper table mat in a restaurant, wrote out the first curriculum, what then became a weekend course called the Director of Coaching. And it's very much directed towards those people that are leading these youth soccer organizations that can be anywhere from a one team organization up to a multi-million-dollar entity with, major capital expenditures with facilities, operating revenues, and, and expenses, like I said, in the millions. So it really evolved that we began doing those courses. And I actually learned more about the environment teaching on those courses. Me bringing the expertise of talking about budgeting, marketing, legal responsibilities, but then really getting an understanding of it and really meeting some people that were, players in it. I know you met Andrew Donnery, who does a lot in youth soccer, and it just kind of evolved from there. I finally said, John, there's a book here. And so I wrote the book. But I think what's really been interesting is the intersection of the work that I was doing for the United States Olympic Committee and some of the national governing bodies was then them saying that, you know what, in order for our sport to continue to grow, we have to strengthen our club systems. And they all identified this weakness. And so they created those opportunities to begin working with the individual sports. And when we met, Ben, again, the United States Olympic Committee saying that, we'd like to run a multi-sport program for a number of the sports out there that maybe don't have the resources, to offer their own programming. Mm-hmm. So really, I think it was kind of a perfect time to be there when the growth of club sport in the United States. And like I said, I think hockey is a club-based sport. Soccer is very much club-based. Baseball has moved in that direction. Lacrosse has definitely moved in that direction. And so if you're going to have clubs, they should be well-run organizations / businesses, because if they're not, they're going to go away. And then the second thing is that they know that they're delivering a good product in terms of developing the players the right way, making sure the kids have a positive experience, enjoying it, understanding the legal responsibilities. It's, when you take a look at what happened with Sandusky and Larry Nassar, and unfortunately that environment, often that those types of things happen. So there's a lot going on there, and it's been really neat to be working with, I would say, over almost 15 years. I've got to think I've interacted with several thousand, coaches, club directors, from soccer to field hockey, and you like to think you've given them some information to do their job a little bit better and make it a better experience for the athletes, while also developing athletes that maybe one day can play at an elite level.
Right. And maybe talk a little bit more about that trend. So you mentioned the emergence of club sport. It wasn't necessarily always this way, right? And where you see that, how it was and where it's going now and where you see it going?
Well, I think our sports system needs to be very much volunteer-based, and it was the classic, mom and pop coaching the son and things like that. And I think you saw an evolution of this beginning probably in the late 70s into the 80s of this idea of a professional youth coach. Now, they've been there before, I think, in some sports more than others, but this whole idea that, if you think your kid has a certain ability, and again, I always joke about 1% of the kids will ever get to play at an elite professional level, but the other 99% all think they're the 1%. Mm-hmm. And so what it's created is, do you want a volunteer coach that doesn't have much training in the sport, or do you want somebody that has, whether it be certified, experience, or whatever, coaching your kid if you want to give your kid the chance at least to try to compete at a higher level? So
no one knows who that kid is. No one knows who that kid necessarily is at 8 years old or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's interesting when you start talking about that evolution of coaches of, I think you can have professional coaches based upon what people are paying, but I always say that, if you're going to pay someone, then there should be some type of check or balance on what their abilities are. And I think, again, you can't just walk in and start teaching third graders. I mean, do you know how to teach third graders? Mm-hmm. And I think, some of the stuff that we do in the club area, the one aspect of it is where you talk about, and I know in hockey, USA Hockey's done an amazing job rolling out their athlete development model of saying, how you coach an 8-year-old is different than how you coach a 10-year-old versus a 12-year-old and so forth. And I think that's one of the biggest messages getting out there, that, again, it's not only good businesses, but you're delivering a good product that number one, kids are enjoying, but number two, the kids are getting better and evolving as athletes in that sport.
And was there anything as you went more into that world of going and speaking and seeing all these different sport clubs and realizing, maybe the lack of education or programs out there for youth sport club leadership. Is there anything that surprised you or startled you about the landscape of where things were at?
I think early on, I guess I'm at that point, nothing surprises me anymore. With some of this, I guess some of the stuff earlier. But I just remember early on where you would have these organizations that would be, literally maybe $1 million businesses that were being run by volunteers. And I'm not saying in most cases well-intentioned, but if you have a full-time job, you're raising a family, and now all of a sudden you're running $1 million business, and I'm turning over a checkbook, and it's unfair.
Yeah.
And I think even on the business side, I always say this when I talk, I said, look, I still think there's people out there that want to coach for the love of coaching, the love of their sport and all those things. And I'm not saying turn those people away, but I think definitely on the organizational side, with the amount of money that's involved, I would not want to put a volunteer in a position of having those funds. I'd rather pay somebody or have an accountant or whatever that, again, they're not going to throw their career away over, some money. But when you give a volunteer, and the reason they're the treasurer of the club is because they ran for president and lost, I mean, that's a recipe for some, potential issues. And I think when you take a look at the club model, it's very much a European, model that the sports were in the clubs. And I think you're seeing that. And again, this whole idea that in other countries, you're not coaching unless you're certified.
Yeah.
And I think that's still some sports it's accepted, but I still think there's some sports in the United States, the idea of certification of coaches. And it's, again, I know the sport. Well, no, do you really know how to coach a 12-year-old?
Yeah.
Do you really know, do you know what the training loads are for a 10-year-old versus a 12-year-old? I mean, and again, you talk about, and again, some of the stuff you have on your website, Ben, I mean, these logical progressions of, what you should be doing to kids so that they're evolving the right way. And I think that's becoming a professional and or treating it like a craft, and the kids are going to benefit from it.
Right. So you talk about in your book some of the future, with the future of youth sport and things. It sounds like, so you talk about the shift from, you said like more of the community type volunteer-based organizations and school compared with scholastic sports, and then the emergence of the club sport, and then the raising of expectations, like you said, of the customer, of the parents and families, of wanting professional coaching, wanting educated people building, and then also even that experience, like you mentioned, run by people that are completely dedicated to that as their career or as their career or their business, building an organization. It sounds like what you're saying is you see that trend just only continuing to grow.
Yeah, I think it's going to continue. I think that people are getting smarter, and I think we're hopefully getting more educated consumers. That whole thing of playing year round at young sports. I mean, everything that's coming out talking about the benefits of a multi-sport experience. I always like to say that, my theory is about the evolution of the sport specific is if I'm running a club and I have to pay my bills, I need a kid playing year round with me. Mm-hmm. Now that may not be good for the kid, but it's good for my business. And then also I'm going to probably keep a kid engaged in a sport that maybe there's another sport that's more, appropriate for them. And that's where I always pitch the idea of that multi-sport organization where, if you have a soccer, basketball, lacrosse club, that you have seasons, and I've seen every different model. We talked about it that weekend of how you spread that across. Going to be the kid's going to play one sport all year round. The kid's going to play in the fall. The kid's going to play all year round, but only one day a week. I mean, there's a variety of ways you can do it. But the thing is nice is that at a certain age, a kid's going to potentially gravitate towards one sport. Well, they're staying within, the same organization. So, for whatever reason, soccer becomes their sport instead of lacrosse or ice hockey. Okay, that's great for the kid. Where now, I know we did the research talking about retention, that, when you have somebody leave your sport, I mean, that's money out the door. So, so I think it's, that's where you start talking about, again, they are businesses, but, a good business and good marketing is meeting people's wants and needs. And I'd like to think that's where the club environment hopefully will go.
Right. And from a long-term perspective, right? Because even good business principles, right, is not to gouge a customer for a short period of time and then lose them from the sport, right? It's to build them. It's for them to maybe bring their younger siblings into the club and bring their friends into the club and things, and grow an organization. Sure. Maybe so for someone that's a young person that's maybe a very passionate about sport. Let's say they were a good player, but not all the way to professional. They started coaching. Now they're going to college or something, and they say, hey, I don't want to go work at some random company or whatever. I want to be in sport for the rest of my life. I want to run or own a youth sports club, one day, what advice would you give to them, the way it's set up? Because I think a lot of times too that people, it's still like it's still relatively new phenomenon, that the professionally run youth sport club in perspective, and I think people may not all realize the career or business or even like entrepreneurial opportunities in that industry.
No, I talked to some students here at the university that, I teach a class here. It's kind of an intro, kind of, hey, here's all the opportunities out there in the career in the field. And I talk about youth sports, and a lot of kids are dismissive of it. And then I just start saying that, what are some of the revenues that are coming in? What are some of the salaries of people that lead these large sports clubs and so forth? But my advice always is, number one, go start coaching, and go coach a bunch of 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds, that kind of thing, just to find out if you want to be in that environment. And then I would say stay engaged all through college while getting somewhat of a business background, but also going to get your licenses in that particular sport, that you're a coach, but you can also do both. So to get a job, you could say, hey, I can be in the back, I can be helping to sell sponsorship and keeping the books while also running out and coaching 2 or 3 teams or overseeing an age group or whatever. So I think it's a combination of, and again, that's where sport management kind of evolved from, is the business side, but also the sports side, is very complementary in that sense. And I think there's, and again, the uniqueness in some things, I think as it's changing, it's, some accepted practices that I think sometimes people may want to look at for the good of the sport and the good of the business too. But I mean, a great one we always talk about is, who's coaching your youngest kids? Mm-hmm. And often in an organization, the person who coaches the youngest kid is often the least qualified person, and the least experienced, and they're the ones going to get the most important age group that you have, as opposed to, and usually they're volunteer, but flipping that to say, instead of having that volunteer that's showing up, getting out of work late, hustling there, and they got a bunch of 6-year-olds that have all this energy, and you're exhausted from a 9-hour day at work. I mean, is that a good mix there for, in a case, not to say that there's not some good people that will do a great job there, but what about grabbing a high school kid or a college kid and paying him $20, a couple, to go do, a couple nights a week? They're enthusiastic. The kids are going to look up to them. They can do the drills. They can play in the games. I mean, these kids, the older kids become a role model for the younger kid. And they always call that stage the romance stage. And that's when kids fall in love with the sport, or they don't fall in love with the sport. And so it's trying to make it that they have fun with it, and then they're going to stay with that sport forever. But we often sabotage it by, not by design, but, hey, well, we're going to have a inexperienced volunteer coach that age group. And sometimes that's going to drive people away with that.
Yeah, is it just because they don't have the resources and things that have you seen any more volunteer community model type sport clubs make the transition into running as a business? Whether, again, you talk about in your book all the different entities, a 501c3, a limited liability company. You talked about even the emergence of franchises and things like that. Have you seen? Because the interesting thing that I learned when we were at the U.S. Olympic Committee events was that a lot of times youth sport organizations are still viewed as that kind of volunteer board, parent-run organization. Yeah. But even and then learning all the different types of entities there are out there in youth sports, like I said, all the way to the franchising type models. Even learning about the best run and operated, even non-for-profit clubs, still look very different than the way we think of the parent-run organization. They're a board of business people in different professions and things like that, and they still oftentimes have a full-time hired executive director on salary or hired coaches and things like that. Have you seen that transition of a program to that model, and maybe any advice there? And why do you think there's still maybe a bit of a stigma or mindset towards that volunteer model?
It's really interesting. I think it goes both ways as far as that stigma is concerned. Because I did a program for, it was a lot of volunteer-based organizations that were there, and a lot of them were complaining that these clubs come in and steal our players. And then I kind of said, are they really stealing them, or are they offering something that those people want? Yeah. And I think where it is like, well, we have volunteer coaches. It's always been that way. Everything like that. And it's like, well, I would say that people who are leaving have looked at it and said, you know what, this is, like a volunteer coach, as well-intentioned as they are, but that's not what's best for my kid. And I think my kid could be a good player. So I'm willing to go down there and pay, more and get a coach that may or may not be better, but at least it's, it's a professional coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you got to take a look at that to say, are you happy to be the feeder system for that program and just be a recreational league that come on out and play fun, have fun playing?
Mm-hmm.
And what's wrong with that? But
Mm-hmm.
the idea that, are you an elite club? Then if you're not, then why are you upset that somebody wants to leave and go be with an elite club?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's like kind of a look in the mirror of like, understanding your purpose and what we're trying to do as an organization in that case. But, I think I haven't seen so many as youth organizations turn into for-profits, because a lot of them have a constitution. They are a 501c3. And then, like you said, the newer organizations are coming out either as, an LLC. I mean, gosh, you have in soccer, I'm familiar, there's a couple different organizations that are franchising. They're going around and selling their brand around the country. And so they've gone more in that business model. I think the plus side and downside of the volunteer model is you have to have a board. And I'm a board fan, but unfortunately, as a volunteer-based organization, you're a 501c3, you have to have this a board of directors. That unfortunately, a lot of people, a board's supposed to be thinking big picture, long-term, not getting into the weeds of an organization, but often an organization board is the parent whose kid didn't make the team last year, and they're getting more involved in conversations about uniform colors instead of saying, hey, should we build a complex and start saving money that in 10 years we'll have enough money to build the complex we want.
Mm-hmm.
They're not thinking beyond the time their kids at that organization. So, but like I said, there's pros and cons on both sides. I've seen amazing volunteer organizations, and I've seen poorly run clubs, that are for profit, and vice versa.
Right.
So, but I definitely, I think you see more of it being viewed as that business. And even the volunteer organizations are saying, what, let's go hire somebody, that will pay, that'll be director of coaching, executive director, or whatever. And then we use the volunteers for a lot of the other services that we try to provide.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And just even shifting that mindset to whether, like I said, no matter what kind of entity you are, if you're shifting your mindset and serving customers, like being run like from a business mindset, how do we serve customers and give them value, right? Versus we own these players, we own these fans, they're our players and someone else is stealing them, right? And the reality is you don't own people, make their own decisions based on the value they perceive, right? And if you can switch your mindset around that way, right? And maybe, like you said, maybe it's misguided or whatever that is, or maybe your coaches are better or whatever, but then it's your job to educate the market about that or to market it, right? So do you think that you talk about marketing as one of your skills and things that you teach on? Is that one of the big areas that a lot of clubs struggle with?
Yeah, I think there's two things with it that you've seen if you consider your potential customers, as players and parents. I mean, social media is probably the most efficient and effective means to reaching people now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was talking to an organization, the amount of money they spent on like canned flyers and things like that. And I'm like, it's people aren't seeing that. They're, like you said, it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's Instagram. It's you making a quick video and sending that out, that's as an advertisement. I mean, the media that you're in, the potentials or the tools are there for you to do a lot of your own marketing. And you don't even have to, do traditional marketing, buying ads or anything like that. I mean, you can do it all yourself. But I think that organizations that are successful are marketing. They're taking a percentage of their overall budget and directing that towards marketing. A lot of people think, well, we'll open up the doors and people will come. No, there's people out there that are unaware of you, and they're unaware of you because they don't know your sport, unaware, or I should say not, non-customers. So some of your non-customers are not aware of you. Others are aware of you, but they don't like you. And others, are just not acting on it. So how do you get those people engaged with your organization? And so that's all marketing. And then marketing it costs a lot to get somebody, but man, one mistake and you could lose them. And so I think the other part of marketing is delivering on what you promised and creating this positive experience. We talk about what's known as the escalator, this idea that you try to get somebody in at a lower level and then continue moving them up the steps. So they go from a 1 week, a Saturday morning program that now they're going to come and sign up for the, Saturday morning program for one, just the fall season. And then maybe we'll get them in for, as they get older, get them in that they're going to play 3 days a week. And so this idea that you're going to move them up as far as their financial investment into you, and that's good marketing. You basically created a loyal customer at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how you break down all the specific aspects of a business, so as someone who's leading a youth sport club, like whether it's marketing, whether it's the budgeting, whether it's the programming, like you said, because the program needs to deliver the promise that the marketing is saying. Otherwise, it's people come in and it's like, oh, that's not what they said in their video or whatever it is, right? And then so maybe to speak for a minute too, though, about one of the things that in your book that you talk about that I think is the most important piece of all that drive all those other business components is that purpose, that vision, that mission, right? Because we talk about this shift in the stigma maybe of, okay, that's not a volunteer organization now. We got people over here, they're getting paid, they're professionals, or it's a business, whatever, running these youth sports. It's easy you said just because they run like a business doesn't mean they're doing ethical things, doesn't mean they're doing the right things for kids long term and stuff like that. You can run a business without doing that. So maybe the importance of getting that vision and mission down, and making that be about, because right, that the interesting thing that youth sport club leaders are in is that this has a significant impact on our future world, right? We have, and I think that's why one of the reasons why you're so passionate about it is these kids and families' experiences impact their future. And if they're have positive youth sport experiences, their identification with sport is a positive thing for life. That can be an amazing thing that a organization can feel great about contributing to society. And if it's done for purely business principles at the expense of long-term athlete development or experiences, just chewing people up and spitting them out, that could be very problematic for in a lot of levels.
Yeah. It's the truth. I mean, you take a look at that. If you look back and, that the sport experience often is a defining moment of a kid's life, in their youth. And again, that's, you're entrusted with that. And I think at the end of the day, kids play sports because they want to compete. They want to have a good time. Mm-hmm. And, are you delivering on that? But then I think you go back to it of, this is a conversation I think each organization has to have in itself. It's like, who are we and why are we doing what we do? Mm-hmm. And again, if you're a club that says that, hey, our ultimate goal is to win every championship possible and to produce elite players that may play at the next highest level, whether it be college, professional, international, whatever, then be that. And people are going to gravitate towards the product that they want. And that's where I go back to it, that sometimes, when I take a look at some of the volunteer youth organizations, hey, somebody's got to introduce a kid to the game, and that they have fun and it's a positive experience so that they get fully engaged. Now, some clubs are going to say, we're going to do everything. Other clubs are going to say, no, we're only elite. And then some clubs may say, hey, we're only recreational. But I think whatever it is, embrace it. But don't try to be something that you're not, because I don't think the customer is going to be happy, in that delivery. And again, if in swimming, it's really interesting. They have these classifications of clubs that you kind of self-designate what you are. And if you're a lower, I think it's their bronze level club, I mean, you're basically saying we have, volunteer coaches. We don't have our own pool. We're teaching the basic strokes and things like that. And it's an honor if one of your kids is recognized to move up to a silver club. Mm-hmm. And then at that silver club, if this kid, is good there, then he should move to a gold club where, that's where kids are going to get scholarships, maybe swim the Olympics one day and all those things. And it's clear that they know who they are and why they're doing it, what they're doing. And I think that's one of the biggest questions to have as an organization is, a lot of people blow off, mission statements, whatever. But no, I think a mission really should communicate what you're doing and how you plan on doing it. And then I think, the other part of that too is, again, you talk about the professionals. A friend that always says this, he goes, my goal is to chase the charlatans and the crooks out of this industry, because there's a lot of them out there making huge promises to parents that are unrealistic, not offering positive experiences, whether it be for fun and or developing the player the right way, and they're making a lot of money. And I think anyone that takes it seriously, doing it the right way, that's an offense to them. Mm-hmm. That they're the people you want to get out of the industry, and that people are doing it the right way for the right reasons in a responsible manner.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, I've heard, for example, we were one of the earlier clubs to become an ADM Model Association, and a lot of that came back towards our mission and our vision of who we wanted to be and what we want to be for our kids, but then also to run a successful organization long term. So it's interesting because I hear when I got in, and I've spoken around the country to different hockey clubs, and sometimes there's fear about going to a long-term athlete development model because certain parents or some people want this, or they're going to lose a team, or they're going to lose some players if they change their model. Maybe just speak a little bit to, it's not always just how your purpose impacts those decisions, and making strong decisions as far as, having the trust and faith that if you do the right things for kids long term, that's a good business principle, even if that means 20 kids leave today because something that making those decisions, even because there's the ethical way, it's like, hey, this is right for kids, this is what we're going to do. But I really believe that even from a business principle standpoint, doing the right things that the research and the science say to do long term is the way to go. I think you can trick people and maybe get away with making some extra money in a short period of time and burn them and then go on to the next people kind of thing. But I think really building a sustainable business, especially you talk about social media and things these days, is doing the right things for kids and development and being educated on that stuff.
Definitely. Definitely. It's really interesting. You look at that from a couple different ways, Ben. I mean, I remember Bob Hunter was on that weekend with you in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
Bob talked about it when I interviewed him about his club. He talked about their organization had a clear mission purpose of what they did. And they were, they were unapologetic about it. They communicated that. And he said, having the courage to disengage with a parent or a player that doesn't buy into what we're doing. Because often it's like, well, he's good, so we're going to put up with it, or we're going to change what we do just because this kid or this parent or whatever. And he said, then you're compromising what you set out to become. And Bob said it. He goes, the number of times where we went to the parent and said, you know what, this is probably not a good fit. What you want, we can't deliver. So it's probably best you go to another club. After that happened, he said there'd be 3 parents who would come up and say, you know what, we were about to leave because of that parent. And so they would have been good people leaving while you're trying to appease somebody that just isn't getting what you're trying to accomplish. And so I think that's really important there. But then that second piece, when you bring up to it, of, again, just this understanding of them having a positive experience and growing as an athlete, growing as a person, and that being a part of what you're doing. I mean, because I think it's interesting, I always put this out when I do the courses. I say, if we're moving away from the educational-based system and you're on a club, you have no affiliation with school. So if you're playing for a school team, you're failing math, you may not be playing this season, or you may not be playing Saturday night. Well, if a kid in your club is not doing well academically, are you willing to make that same statement? That, yes, we're tied to this, and if you're not doing well academically, you won't play for the club game on Saturday. You don't have to. But is that becoming a part of who you are? And then I think the other part of it too is, when you start talking about, like you mentioned, the ADM, I mean, just doing it the right way and having a process in place that you believe in. And I think the biggest thing with athlete development, and as you mentioned, it's educating the parents and getting the parents to buy in. And over the years, we've seen people who've done some pretty neat things to get that. One of the big ones is having the testimonials of former players coming back and saying, yeah, when we were the younger ages, we didn't do well, but we focused on our skill development. And then about age 11 and 12, we went from being, not winning games to we were skillful. And when the winning mattered, we were prepared to win. And like I said, we're Americans. You're in the American culture. For the Americans who are watching this, we have to win everything, whether it be under 6 or a gold medal in the Olympic Games. But winning and development aren't often the same thing. And I mean, in a sport like yours, Ben, or like I say, in soccer, if I want to win a 6-on-6 youth soccer game at under 8, I'm going to put, 5 of my kids stand right in front of the goal because they'll cover the front of it and say, don't move.
Yeah.
And I'll have one kid up top and say, look, one ball, kick it up there. He scores, and we'll get 6 guys in front of that goal.
Yeah.
I may go undefeated that year, but did I make my players any better?
Right.
And so I think that's where you have to say, what are our goals? And we've had some really neat stuff. And again, one of the biggest challenges, like I always talk about educating parents, is getting parents to sit down. And so on a couple of our courses, we've had people that have developed online training programs. One just, basically it's an online open parent meeting, but the other one is an online course on our athlete development plan and explaining it to parents. And your kid can't play until you sign off that you watch the videos. So they're ensuring that people are at least understanding what we're doing. And I think the other part of it too is often coaches, and this is where you start talking about the leadership of a club, that, you're doing something. A lot of people say, well, I don't talk to parents. Well, you ought to talk to parents because in a sense, they're one of your customers.
Right.
As the kid or the parent are both at your customer. So if you're just doing things and the parents are over on the sidelines, and I always talk about, you have three parents on the sidelines. You have the parent that thinks they know everything and they don't. They have the parent that knows nothing, absolutely nothing, because that all the other kids are doing it, so I'm going to put my kid in that activity. And then maybe you have that person that does know the sport. The challenge is keeping that guy that doesn't know anything, who thinks they do, away from the person that doesn't know anything. Because there's a recipe for for disaster. And instead of letting that guy control what's going over on the sideline, as a coach or a director of coaching, going up, hey, this is what we're doing tonight in practice, and this is why we're doing it. And I think you're going to see your son or daughter getting better at doing these things. As a matter of fact, when you're watching tonight, hey, take a half hour in the lawn, in your backyard, and do that with him or her.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're engaging them in the experience. You're explaining why they're doing it. And I think that in return has people buying into what you're doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's taking that mindset, the business, looking at it as a business mindset, and that parent. I've seen that, like you said, certain coach. We don't talk to parents. We just go, and it's great. Like obviously, you coach the kids and you want to work with the kids, but the parents are the customer, right? The parents are making the decision. The parents are writing the check, and so if you're not willing to spend time and I just want to sum up, I think too, the things that you're continuing saying is being clear about who we are, setting those expectations so that, because there's nothing worse than having someone join your club. It's maybe a 6 to 8 month season, and their expectations are totally opposite of what you do. They're not going to be happy, and it's going to be in the 6 months, 7 months later, it's just going to build and get worse. So really being clear about who you are, what you do, and then taking the time to, whether it's through marketing or whether it's through just old-fashioned meetings and things like that, as well as is making sure that that customer, which is the parent, is making a decision with full expectation and matching those expectations. And that's really, like you said, those are basic business principles, I think, right? Yeah. That's, even if you're selling something on Amazon, you don't want a bunch of people returning stuff because they said that you misrepresented it or whatever. It's the same idea.
And you put it really well. I mean, because again, at the end of the day, everything that we do is marketing. I mean, marketing is meeting people's wants and needs. And I think you're going to have a successful organization if you go out and give those people what they want. And like I said, there's parents that just want their kid to play a sport. I have no illusions of my kid being a professional athlete or anything like that. Just want them to go have some fun. And at the other end, you have the parents who are like, yeah, my kid, has the abilities. Or I think my kid could be this elite player. And, there's two different products that they're wanting. And you mix them up, neither of them are going to be happy.
Yeah.
In what they're getting. So I think as much as you can communicate, this is who we are and this is why we do it. And then again, if you don't like it, that's fine. Then go find a product, that meets those needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, I know I appreciate us going so far over time already. I do have one more before we go here. I would love to see at the end of the book, you kind of give a fictitious future example of where youth sport clubs are going. We've talked already about the emergence of youth sport clubs, the change in history from just the community or faith-based programs up to the scholastic system, the new emergence of sport clubs, now the professionalization of sport clubs, whether that be a non-for-profit who's hiring full-time and professional coaches, or a LLC or franchise even that's starting. You talk about some of the future trends. You've already alluded to multi-sport and things, but where do you see, 10, 20 years from now for people that want to have that full-time career in youth sports? How do you see maybe that looking and some of the new trends that are coming?
It's interesting. I mean, I think some sports are already going there. I mean, if you look at soccer, I think hockey in some ways with the NHL initiative and what they're doing in some of the cities and the branding and things like that. But that classic model that a kid at age 8 is playing in a club that's affiliated with an MLS franchise, mm-hmm. and in theory they can make their way all the way up to that professional team. I think when that environment gets created, that that's again the European club model, that we have full-time coaches and directors at all those different stages. And you're paying for it probably at the younger age and so forth, but ultimately, we're homegrown players. Mm-hmm. And I think you're going to see more of that. I'd like to think that you're going to see it. I think it's catching on already. You're starting to see the multi-sport clubs coming into play. I think you're going to see it. I think there's already out there this idea of being not so much the coach of a team, but a trainer. That come work with me 3 days a week on whether it be your slap shot, your jump shot, your those kinds of things. I think you see that specialization occurring in there. But then I also wonder often at what point is there going to be a backlash of this is so crazy, we're out. I think that when you take a look at video games right now, video games are, it's a serious threat to, to sport. I mean, when we talk about traditional sport, kids are getting engaged in it. Then you hear about scholarships, all those things, and that's a concern. I think for some sports. I think some sports are going to be at a higher trajectory. I think hockey, I think lacrosse, I think soccer is soccer right now. But I mean, I worry about baseball and football in the United States. Football because of the concussion issues, and I think baseball more of just a cultural, the nature of the game. It's a slow-paced game.
Yeah.
And want to move, kids want to run, all those things. So, but no, I do believe it's becoming more, and I think the last thing I'll say, even more so in what I call that post-Sandusky Nassar world that we are, based upon the checks and balances that are now in place because of what occurred there, and to keep up with that, it's you're looking at more professional and certifications coming to try to ensure the safety and the well-being of the kids. Forget about developing elite athletes. Let's talk about the safety and the well-being of these kids. So I think all those things are only going to continue to evolve in the direction of it becoming more structured, professionalized, and potentially certified. Certifications.
Yeah, it's interesting with all of the new federal initiatives out from the safe sport policies, meaning that board members, whether again for-profit, nonprofit, or nonprofit clubs, are signing on the dotted line that you are liable for anything that happens illegally. You could go to jail for these things. And I've heard that there's a lot of volunteers saying, hey, I'm not I do this in my spare time. Sometimes I'm busy at work, whatever. I'm not signing on the dotted line to do this. I'm volunteering, trying to help out. Versus someone, if it's your career and your profession or it's your business, taking that responsibility is more natural, I think. But I already see some of the volunteers saying, I don't want any part of this. I'm trying to help out, and I got to take all this on now.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you on that, Ben. And, and I heard it one time. I mean, it's interesting, I think also, but you take a look at the evolution. I don't think people volunteer like they used to, and I've heard that across one thing, the guy that wants to coach his kid or something like that. But I mean, the idea that, hey, why don't you just come out to the field and watch your kid play, sit on the sideline, enjoy it, and we'll pay someone who's going to be out there and know what they're doing, and you can just sit there and enjoy it instead of you coaching your kid and all those things. And I mean, there's success stories with that, but there's a lot of bad stories that go south with the parent that gets in the coaching side of things. But I just think that point right there, like you had said, the liability now that's going along with it, and the background checks and everything like that in order to be there, that's asking somebody a lot, in being a volunteer.
Yeah. And then you mentioned just a bit in the future, just following up in the future, you do talk about some national, why is the professionalization, why do you see the kind of the scaling future of youth sport clubs as far as the national chains or franchisers or things like that? How do you see that? Is that something a trend that you see continuing to just accelerate?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, like I said, you take a look at the European model that FC Barcelona. Barcelona has a basketball team, a volleyball team, a soccer team. I mean, it's a social club. It's all those things. And I think that whole idea that, I took that franchising model from what I've seen in soccer. There's a Rush organization that they went with that franchise model around the country. But this idea that you could create that from the top down and have it all around the country is kind of an interesting concept. Of where it could go. And everybody, just like McDonald's, everybody's doing it the same way in all those different spots. But still with that, I think everything happens incrementally. I still think there's some institutions that are very strong. I mean, I would love to see the NBA get involved as like soccer's doing, but I don't think the NBA will because they're concerned about the potential things to go wrong in the youth sport environment that then would damage the NBA brand. Again, if something occurs in a Lakers youth organization, then all anybody hears is the Lakers coach was involved in this. And I think the NBA has been very conscious, of their brand, in that sense. But I think hockey's moving in that direction. Soccer has definitely gone that way. That they want to have those associations with those organizations. And number one, it not only develops players, but it develops fans.
Yeah.
And I think that's even the bigger thing is, not everybody's going to play in the NHL, but if I get aligned with with the organization, I'm going to stay a fan for life. And
Yeah.
I think that's important.
And it's interesting that bringing those resources to youth sport too, right? So whether that's the NHL or the professional teams bringing their resources, or whether if it's a national chain, I think makes sense with what you're talking about as far as the business development, because now the marketing staff or administrators or leadership people can those resources can be brought to the additional markets or additional locations and things, rather than have to like technically, I guess. If you had a really successful franchise or something, they could pick up a club that only has 80 people to start, but they could provide the resources and support of the 1,000-player club that it has, in the next state over or something.
Sure. And it's funny when you start talking about the consolidation of, we had a guy who's actually in LA, one of our soccer coaches, he combined with soccer with another sport, and it centralized certain services. Like they didn't want to do the administrative stuff. He said, yeah, we're good at that. And then it was very beneficial. You had kids going back and forth through sports. You had some soccer players who ended up leaving to go play volleyball, vice versa. But he was talking about the financial benefits of it, ranging from, we can buy uniforms in bulk, that we buy more warm-ups, and and that drove down the price. So we were able to either make money or pass that savings on our membership and so forth. So there's a lot of benefits that go along with that.
Yeah, really interesting. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending extra time with me as well.
Yeah, sure. Great.
For people that have more interest or want to kind of check some of your stuff out, maybe just tell them where they can find your books or anything else that you're doing coming up.
Yeah, again, Human Kinetics has the sports club management book. It's actually, we're in the process of actually going to do a second edition. Okay. It got kind of put off, but I think we're going to try to get working on that very shortly. And then check out Q Sport Hub. Is a kind of a portal where we're trying to get people, from the coaches to the parents to the athletes to the officials, everybody kind of in the same spot. And one, you can communicate within those groups, but also have the opportunity to communicate across those groups. And it's, I think, kind of an open, an open source type of environment that we're just looking for people with ideas that are willing to share and for the betterment of sport, at all levels.
So, what was that called again? Youth Sport Hub?
YouthSportHub.com.
YouthSportHub.com. Okay, great. We'll put it in the show notes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us. And I'll be picking up the second edition of your book, and hopefully we can have you on again.
Sounds great, Ben. Great job, man. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you.